Lucy, what have you got to say for yourself?
Hello, friends. I'm your Vitamin girl. Are you tired, Brenda?
Never mind.
You move out.
America loved Lucy and Ricky's perfect marriage on screen. But behind the cameras, Desi Arnaz was living a double life that would shock the nation. He was seeing 2 or 3 women every week through Hollywood's underground network. Lucille Ball once slapped his supplier across the face at a party. But the affairs weren't even his darkest secret. There were mob threats, gambling debts, and arrests that nearly destroyed everything. In 1985, at age 68, Desi finally stood up in rehab and said 5 words that changed everything. The truth was uglier than anyone imagined. When Desi Arnaz was born in 1917 in Santiago de Cuba, he wasn't just born into money. He was born into power, privilege, and legacy. His father was already a mayor at just 23, and his mother's side came from the family that helped build the Bacardi empire. Desi grew up in a mansion with servants, private boats, a home on its own island, and more acres of ranch land than a child could even count. He played among luxury cars and prize-winning horses, and the people who visited their estate weren't neighbors. They were lawmakers, generals, and business tycoons. From the very beginning, Desi's life seemed destined for greatness, but Cuba had other plans. In 1933, when he was just 16, everything exploded. Armed revolutionaries burst into his family's estate and burned it to the ground. They destroyed everything: the house, the ranches, the livestock, the boats, and they were coming for the people next. His father had been a politician tied to the president, and that made them targets. Desi barely survived. Someone yanked him into a moving car as he was running for his life. He had to shout, "Viva la revolución!" just to avoid being shot while clinging to the side of the speeding vehicle. His mother also barely escaped when rebels reached their second property. Everything was taken. Everything was gone. His father didn't escape. He was captured and thrown into a Havana prison on political charges. There were whispers of execution. For 6 months, Desi's mother waited while her husband endured filth and fear behind bars. Only a last-minute legal move saved him. Even then, Batista himself told Desi's father to get out of Cuba if he wanted to stay alive. So the family packed up what little they had left and fled the country they once ruled. By June 1934, Desi was standing on a dock in Key West, wearing the only clothes he owned. He and his father caught a Greyhound bus to Miami with a few $100s. That's where the palace life truly ended. They lived in a roach-infested warehouse that doubled as a storage office. They didn't have beds, just cots. The rats were so bold that they needed baseball bats to scare them off. For food, they ate canned beans every day. Desi, who used to have chauffeurs and servants, got a job cleaning bird cages at a pharmacy. He made $15 a week. And yet, even then, he was proud to be earning something. He also swept floors at Woolworths and helped his father lay tile in luxury homes they could never afford. But Desi didn't complain. Every rat he killed, every dollar he earned, added to a burning drive inside him. He wasn't just trying to survive, he was planning a comeback. He enrolled at St. Patrick's Catholic School and took on every odd job he could to cover tuition. When that wasn't enough, he applied to St. Leo Prep near Tampa to improve his English. But what truly helped him fit in was music. American movies, songs, and hotel lounges became his real classroom. Even when he could barely speak English, Desi could sing. His charisma needed no translation. In 1936, when he was just 19, Desi landed his first real break. He got a gig at the Roni Plaza Hotel in Miami Beach, earning $39 a week with the Siboney Septet. That job came from a surprising source: Alberto Barreras, the exiled president of the Cuban Senate, who vouched for him. It was a glamorous hotel, full of wealthy tourists, and Desi's music lit up the room. But his father hated it. He yelled at him, furious that his son wanted to be a goddamn musician. But Desi pushed back. He told his father that anything was better than scrubbing cages. Slowly, he wore him down. Then, in 1937, came a brutal career twist. Xavier Cugat, the top name in Latin music, offered Desi a job, but with a 50% pay cut. Desi left his $50 a week band to earn just $25 with Cugat, because he believed this step down could lead somewhere bigger. And it did. He became a sensation at the Great Lakes Exposition in Cleveland, and his salary eventually ticked up to $35, still less than before, but now he had a name. By 1938, though, the pay wasn't enough. Desi was starving, literally. He demanded better wages, and when Cugat wouldn't budge, Desi pulled a bold move. He made a deal. He could start his own band and use Cugat's name, Desi Arnaz, and his Xavier Cugat Orchestra, if he paid a weekly fee of $25. Cugat agreed, but Desi's first show was a disaster. Two of his bandmates weren't even Latin, no one knew the music, and the crowd hated it. The club owner didn't mince words. "You are fired." That was terrible. That could have been the end. But in 1939, Desi clawed his way back. He landed a spot at La Conga nightclub in Manhattan. This wasn't just any club. It was right in the middle of the theater district. Desi turned the place into a phenomenon. He introduced the American crowd to the conga line, transforming it from a Cuban tradition into a national craze. The club was packed every night, and the name Desi Arnaz began buzzing across New York. That same year, his electric performances caught the eye of Broadway producers Rogers and Hart. They cast him in the musical Too Many Girls. His nightly conga routines became the show's highlight. It was such a hit that RKO bought the movie rights almost immediately. At just 22, he was handpicked from a Broadway stage to appear in the 1940 film Too Many Girls. It was a major break, but what changed his life forever wasn't just the role. It was the woman he met on set. Lucille Ball was 29, sharp, confident, and already a star. Everyone on the train ride to Hollywood was guessing who she'd fall for. Most bets went to Van Johnson, but he shrugged and said, "No way, she's going for the dark, Latin type." And he was right. What sparked between Desi and Lucille wasn't just romance, it was lightning. They kept it secret for nearly a year, hiding their relationship from agents, reporters, and almost everyone around them. But behind the scenes, their connection was growing fast and wild. Even before Hollywood, Desi was already famous in New York nightlife. At La Conga, his conga rhythms turned every night into a frenzy. Women were lining up to hear him play. He wasn't just performing, he was turning Cuban music into something America couldn't stop dancing to. Then came the war. On April 27, 1943, Desi was drafted into the U.S. Army. But his service didn't follow the usual path. He had health problems the Army couldn't ignore. Doctors found high blood pressure and injuries in both knees. His left knee wrecked during a football game. His right knee hurt again on May 23, 1943, during a baseball match at Camp Arlington. He had pain that wouldn't go away, and some doctors suspected Pellegrini-Stieda disease, though it was never confirmed. These injuries meant he couldn't fight overseas, so he was stationed in California at a military hospital, serving for exactly 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days. There, he lifted spirits instead of rifles, organizing entertainment for wounded soldiers, and arranging celebrity visits that often included glasses of cold milk, the thing many recovering soldiers craved most. But Hollywood didn't care about medical files. Rumors hit fast and hard. Gossip columns accused Desi of dodging the draft, painting him as a coward, while others were dying in Europe and the Pacific. It nearly destroyed his career. To defend himself, he had to expose secret details of his service, including the fact that he helped coordinate morale-boosting visits for injured veterans. He even had to explain the milk thing. Yes, milk. The image of him joking and playing music while others fought overseas didn't sit well, even though he earned the Army Good Conduct Medal, the American Campaign Medal, and the World War II Victory Medal. On October 1, 1943, He became a U.S. citizen in San Bernardino County, officially changing his name from Desiderio Alberto Arnaz to Desi Arnaz. Still, the rumors never fully left him alone, not even after his honorable discharge on September 30th, 1945. The very next day, December 1st, 1945, Desi got back to work. He wasted no time reviving his orchestra, and this time, the timing was perfect. Latin music was booming. He landed a gig as band leader for Bob Hope's Pepsodent show on NBC Radio and signed a deal with RCA Victor. Suddenly, Cuban Pete was blasting through radios across the country. Desi wasn't just back, he was bigger than ever. His friend Marco Rizzo joined him as pianist and arranger, helping create a sound that mixed authentic Cuban energy with just the right amount of American flair. His orchestra became so profitable that even when he became a TV star, Desi kept the band on payroll. Rizzo would even arrange music for the show that would define them both. But before the fame, there was fire. After just 6 months of dating, filled with passion and fights that could shake walls, Desi and Lucille decided to get married. It was November 30th, 1940. Desi was supposed to perform 2 shows at the Roxy in New York that day. Instead, he called to cancel the first show and said, "I'm getting married." They drove to Connecticut, thinking the wait for a marriage license would be shorter than in New York. It wasn't. They still needed 5 days. But a judge named Harold Knapp gave them a special waiver, and they tied the knot that same afternoon at the Byram River Beagle Club. Lucille wore a fur jacket. Desi bought a ring from Woolworth's, the only place open on a Saturday. That night, they drove straight back to New York so Desi could perform the second show. He carried Lucille over the dressing room threshold. Their love was real, but it was never easy. Once, during a jealous argument, Lucille threw a vase at him. Their marriage was fire and gasoline from the start. By 1950, everything changed again. CBS executives didn't believe audiences would accept a Cuban-American co-starring in a sitcom. They doubted the accent, the chemistry, the whole idea. So Desi and Lucille took their show on the road, literally. They toured the country, performing live shows, proving to packed houses that what they had wasn't just real, it was magnetic. The audience loved them. That same year, Desi invented something no one in television had seen before: the 3-camera filming method. He wanted to preserve the spontaneity of live performance, while still getting every angle in one take. On March 2nd, 1951, his 34th birthday, they filmed the pilot. When I Love Lucy finally aired on October 15th, 1951, it was an instant sensation. But behind the scenes, Desi wasn't done innovating. When CBS refused to pay extra for high-quality 35mm filming, Desi and Lucille gave up $1,000 of their combined weekly salary, dropping from $5,000 to $4,000 to keep ownership of the show's negatives. That decision changed everything. Because they owned the film, they owned the rights. And because it was 35mm, it could be re-aired without losing quality. Desi had just invented reruns. He didn't just change a show, he changed the entire business model of television. Within 10 years, nearly every major primetime show was being filmed in Los Angeles on 35mm. Desi took creative control seriously. After just 1 episode, he fired the original director. He thought the pacing was wrong, the camera work clumsy, so he took over. He started directing, pushing the cast through long, exhausting rehearsals, 12-hour days, scene after scene until the timing was perfect. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always pleasant, but it worked. That crisp, fast-paced style became the show's signature. People laughed, not just because the jokes were good, but because the rhythm hit just right. Then came the biggest moment of all. In 1952, Lucille became pregnant with Daisy Jr., and for the first time in TV history, a real pregnancy became part of the storyline. Censors panicked. They wouldn't even let the word pregnant air on TV. The writers used expecting, or the French word enceinte, instead. But when Lucy Goes to the Hospital aired on January 19, 1953, The exact day Lucille delivered Daisy Jr. via C-section, something happened that had never happened before. 73.9% of all televisions in America were tuned in. That meant 44 million people watched Lucy give birth. It was more than had watched Eisenhower's presidential inauguration the very next day. The baby became known as Lucy's $50,000 baby, and he was featured on the very first cover of TV Guide. In 1957, he pulled off something no one expected. He bought the old RKO Pictures lot, once run into the ground by Howard Hughes, for $6 million. That deal gave Desilu 33 sound stages, more than MGM or 20th Century Fox had at the time. He didn't pay for it with cash on hand either. He sold off the pre-1960 episodes of I Love Lucy to CBS, using the past to finance the future. With that move, Desilu stopped being a renter and became an owner. And suddenly, it wasn't just a production company. It was a Hollywood empire. That same year, Arnaz took another bold risk. He greenlit The Untouchables in 1959 despite pushback. It was gritty, violent, and featured real mobsters like Al Capone and Lucky Luciano. It wasn't polite television. Some networks said no. CBS passed. But Arnaz pushed it onto ABC, and the gamble paid off. It became a massive hit, even while generating threats from real-life mob figures. The show brought Desilu millions and proved that adult crime dramas could work in prime time. But the success wasn't without danger. In 1960, Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana reportedly ordered a hit on Arnaz over the show's portrayal of the mafia. The threat was real, serious enough to make people in Hollywood nervous. Giancana was violent, unpredictable, and under FBI surveillance. The only thing that stopped the plan was a last-minute veto from inside the mafia itself. That same year, the weight of Arnaz's lifestyle, booze, women, pressure, finally cracked his marriage. On March 3, 1960, Lucille Ball filed for divorce, calling their life together a nightmare. Their problems weren't new. In fact, they had been building for years. Back in 1953, Lucille Ball nearly lost everything when newspapers accused her of being a communist. She had registered back in 1936 to please her grandfather, a man who strongly supported workers' rights. It was a minor thing at the time, but now, with McCarthyism in full swing, it exploded into scandal. Headlines screamed, "Lucille Ball a Red," in bold red ink. People were panicking, but Desi stepped in. He called J. Edgar Hoover directly. The FBI cleared her publicly. Without that, Desilu might have collapsed before it even reached its peak. By 1957, Arnaz was pushing another kind of television experiment. Instead of short weekly sitcoms, he produced the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, 13 one-hour specials with a massive $50,000 per episode budget. That kind of money allowed big-name guest stars and gave the show a special event feel. The first 5 aired as seasonal specials, and the rest became part of Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse. These hour-long episodes let them avoid the grind of weekly production while still keeping audiences hooked. CBS kept rerunning those episodes as summer replacements all the way through 1967. Desilu wasn't just about Lucy and Desi anymore either. By 1959, the studio was producing 26 shows. Arnaz had turned Desilu into a playground for creative talent. Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse became the testing ground for bold new ideas. One of them was Rod Serling's The Time Element, a strange story about a man dreaming of Pearl Harbor. That single episode led directly to The Twilight Zone, which launched later in 1959. That same creative freedom eventually led to Star Trek and Mission Impossible. Both greenlit during Desilu's golden years, but behind the studio walls, trouble was brewing. Arnaz was drinking more. Lucy Arnaz, their daughter, later said the alcohol affected the whole family. His drinking wasn't just a personal habit, it was starting to show on camera. Lucille Ball was furious. She saw his performances slipping, and she felt like the public didn't see the chaos happening at home. By 1959, it wasn't just drinking. There were arrests. One night, Desi was caught stumbling drunk on Hollywood Boulevard. The headlines humiliated Lucille, and their daughter remembered the constant yelling at home. Then, there were the women, and not just the occasional fling. According to Hollywood insider Scotty Bowers, Arnaz was seeing 2 or 3 women a week, all arranged for him through a well-connected underground network. Bowers even claimed Lucille Ball confronted him at a party and slapped him across the face. Her charm had limits, and betrayal pushed her past them. The problems didn't stop with infidelity. Arnaz also had a serious gambling issue. At one point, he lost so much money in Las Vegas that when Desilu went public in 1958, he walked away with only around $70,000 to $80,000 after clearing debts. That was barely a dent compared to what the studio was worth. And the losses weren't just financial. They took a toll on his reputation, his family, and the trust between him and Ball. Even after the divorce, Arnaz's problems didn't go away. In 1966, now remarried to Edith Mack Hirsch, he fired a gun during a confrontation with teenagers who had allegedly been harassing his daughter Lucy. He was arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. The man who once stood beside America's most beloved comedian was now spending time in county jail over a backyard dispute. Alcohol, rage, and pressure never seemed far away from his decisions. Still, in quieter moments, there were signs he understood what he had become. Years later, after his second wife passed in 1985, his children convinced him to seek help. At an AA meeting, Desi stood up and said, "I'm Desi, and I'm an alcoholic." It was honest, it was broken, but it was real. After Lucille Ball bought out Desi Arnaz's shares of Desilu Productions in 1962 for $3 million, she held on to the company for 5 more years. Then, in 1967, she sold it to Gulf Plus Western, the parent company of Paramount, for an eye-watering $17 million. Adjusted for today's value, that's over $160 million. The sale marked a turning point, not just financially, but emotionally. Almost immediately, Arnaz launched his own production company and brought The Mothers-in-Law to life for NBC. He didn't just produce the sitcom, he directed every single episode, poured himself into it, and even cast Lucille Ball in several surprise appearances. As if that wasn't enough of a full-circle moment, he made his own cameos as Señor Delgado, a flamboyant matador role that gave a wink to his theatrical past. It was his first major project, after walking away from the studio that he and Lucille had built together from scratch. Almost a decade later, in 1976, Desi shocked everyone by popping back into the spotlight through a Saturday Night Live appearance, hosted alongside his son, Desi Jr., who played the musical guest. That same year, he released his autobiography, simply titled A Book. But the pages were anything but simple. He opened up about fleeing Cuba during the revolution, losing everything, and starting from zero in Miami. He cleaned bird cages in drugstores before anyone ever saw him on screen. He wrote about how his once privileged life collapsed overnight and how he fought tooth and nail to reinvent himself. For the first time, people saw beyond the smooth-talking Ricky Ricardo and into the life of a refugee who had bluffed his way into the American dream. But life didn't stay golden. In December 1981, he was rushed to Scripps Memorial Hospital in La Jolla, California, after a sudden burst of stomach pain. He was 64. The diagnosis was a familiar demon, diverticulitis. He had already been through 4 major surgeries for it between 1969 and 1970. This time, the disease put him in intensive care, with his condition swinging between serious and fair. Lucille Ball, still in his orbit despite everything, revealed publicly that this wasn't his first encounter with the illness. Doctors pointed to a lifetime of smoking Cuban cigars and drinking as the roots of his health issues. The signs of physical wear were no longer ignorable. His body had taken more punishment than most fans could ever imagine. Then came the year that changed everything. 1985. After the death of his second wife, Edith Mack Hirsch, Desi hit rock bottom. His children, especially Desi Jr., who had already gone through his own rehab journey in 1981, convinced their father it was time to face the truth. At 68 years old, Arnaz checked into rehab under the name Bill Sanchez. No press, no spotlight, just quiet surrender. And in one moment that Desi Arnaz would later call her proudest memory, he stood up in a meeting and said, "I'm Desi, and I'm an alcoholic." It was simple, honest, and raw. From that moment, he never drank again. He managed to stay sober for exactly 1 year, but the damage had been done. Years of alcohol and tobacco had left his body too weakened to enjoy the peace that sobriety finally brought him. In 1986, Desi began working on a revival of his old production company. He still had the drive, the vision, the ambition, but lung cancer ended all of that. The diagnosis came fast and hit hard. His doctor didn't sugarcoat it. It was from smoking those Cuban cigars. That's the truth. As his condition worsened, he tried to manage business from his bed, dictating instructions, holding on. Lucy stayed by his side constantly. He had fought through addiction and made it to the other side, only for cancer to take away everything just as he found clarity. On December 2, 1986, 1 year to the day after he got sober, Desi Arnaz died in his daughter's arms. He was 69, 2 days before his death. On what would have been his 46th wedding anniversary with Lucille Ball, she called him. He hadn't spoken or eaten in 3 days, but she kept saying, "I love you," over and over. And finally, he answered with his last full sentence, "I love you too, honey. Good luck with your show." 5 days later, she stood quietly at his funeral. And then, barely catching her breath, she attended the Kennedy Center Honors to accept her own Lifetime Achievement Award. But even in death, Desi's legacy wasn't finished. Years later, people began to fully understand just how revolutionary his business decisions had been. When CBS refused to pay the extra cost of filming I Love Lucy on 35mm, Desi and Lucille put up $5,000 per episode themselves so they could own the rights. That one move created the rerun industry. By 2012, CBS was still earning $20 million a year from that show alone. Desi had also pioneered the 3-camera sitcom format, working alongside Carl Freund, the genius behind Metropolis and Dracula. He insisted on filming in front of live audiences with the polish of a Hollywood movie. By the time Lucille sold Desilu in 1967, it had become a juggernaut worth $17 million, which would equal about $130 million today. At the time of his death, Desi's net worth stood at $20 million, mostly from royalties tied to the very industry he helped invent. And yet, what hit hardest wasn't the money or the innovation. It was the revelation that came years later. In a powerful interview in 2025, Desi Arnaz admitted that her proudest memory wasn't her father's fame. It was that quiet moment in rehab when he stood up and said his name. She recalled how he had always told her, "We don't air our dirty laundry in front of other people." But when he finally did, it changed everything. He chose healing over pride, even if it came just a few years too late. Still, there's one more twist in the legacy. In the final years of Desilu, before it was sold, Arnaz had made a risky choice. He backed a pilot for a little-known science fiction show called Star Trek. It was expensive, chaotic, and nearly tanked the studio. The same went for Mission: Impossible. But what seemed like failure at the time turned into one of the biggest payoffs in TV history. Star Trek alone has made over $10 billion. Mission: Impossible brought in $3 billion more, but back then, they were just money pits. Too expensive to save the company. CBS refused to cover Star Trek's budget overruns, and Desilu had no choice but to fold. The very shows that broke the studio would later become two of the most successful franchises in entertainment history.